All right, let's let everybody in. Whoever, it might just be. It is the man himself. It might just be you and me today, which would not be a bad thing. We can discuss how Will Haskell put us out of business as a marketer and a philosopher.
It's the truth, isn't it? I think you did a really great job at this format that you won't often desire to use, but that it's good to have in your quiver as an arrow that could be pulled and shot when necessary. You know, I'm sure it took a lot of work, but it really came across great. You did the connections beautifully, and I just can't imagine a better interview with a young political guy. He's truly extraordinary, and you ask him all the right stuff. It was a great conversation.
I mean, the advantage of doing it the way I did, well, as I only realized like a couple of hours ago that I could have just uploaded it. Technically, all I would do is you upload it to YouTube as an unlisted, and then you just share screen and put it full screen. And the advantage of doing it that way, by the way, is that I can actually be on the screen at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of cool. So I think I can even talk over it as well, which is kind of cool too. So be able to add a little bit of extra commentary or offer that interaction.
But today's way was very smooth, never seemed artificial at all. It flowed. And so in that respect, you know, it's not anything you have to improve. But if you wanted to do it differently, yeah, it's cool to know that you could. But I was just shocked at how the continuity worked today. It didn't feel scattershot at all, you know, but with your interlarded commentary was just, it worked great.
I liked it a lot. I mean, well, it just shows you once the hard work had been put into it, it was an absolute cakewalk. I mean, it felt pleasurable. I mean, I was also able to write much more extensive notes. Normally I just scribble a word, you know, and should we compare notes?
I've got to do this, right? I mean, really.
I mean, there were a lot of, but I could actually write the notes out today, you know, like this idea of, you know, there's more to life than winning. And then when he said, you know, whether I'm your state senator or just your neighbor, I mean, these are very profound statements.
It is, right? And that takes us back to the founding vision of what self-government is supposed to be all about, right? Not this spectacle for which we're all spectators who make this, who at least go to the trouble, sometimes half of us, to go, you know, for me, a couple miles away to vote or to get the absentee ballot as I did this year. But this sense that governance is supposed to be an ongoing thing, you know, it's supposed to be an ongoing concern.
But yeah, I mean, you get the feeling that and I know it sounds kind of crazy, but you get the feeling that he believes in the issues, as opposed to just following the party line. So, what I mean by that, something like gun control and countering gun violence, he's lived through it.
Yeah, right.
You know, as opposed to, and you know, the one thing that I've always had a problem with, and look, I'll say it on both sides. I think I've seen one Democrat that has disagreed with Nancy Pelosi in 4 years. And there was this guy, what's his name? Ro Connor, you know, and he just got chastised for doing so. Right. But on the other side, just what we're telling our kids is that it's okay to be a bully. And I'm not even referring to Trump, which is obvious, or the irony of, you know, be best. Right. I'm talking about Mitch McConnell. I'm talking about how he would just stand up and lecture, and the way that he would just repeat the phrases, you know, just to emphasize, just to almost like taking your thumb and putting it on an open wound. And he would always refer patronizingly to my friends on the other side of the aisle, when you know that they're not friends at all. Right. And I just think to myself, like, this, it's easy to be cynical when you look at that. Yeah. And it is, you know, it is almost hopeless to for our kids to look at that and go, I want to be that. Yeah. You know, I want to be that guy. I want to be that, you know, that woman when I grow up. You just won't see that. But Will's little moment is he wakes up the day after the last election and he was like, I don't like this. I don't like this feeling. I want to be a part of something. I want to be a part of change. It was amazing.
Well, see, this is what's so hopeful. And it's one of the things that helps me understand a little bit the people who are so intent on term limits, right? Because the Mitch McConnells of the world have just been there way too long. They're calcified. They're no longer responsive, right? But the whole idea of term limits, in a sense, kind of relieves us of our responsibility. Right, we're supposed to vote these guys out, not wait until we can get some law passed that forces them out. You know, what are we, idiots? You know, that we let this go on. And that's why, Will, it's like fresh air. It's like the green buds on a tree. It's like, okay, this is the hope of the future right here. And to see a person like him, and I'm sure they're as rare as he seems to us, I'm sure there are other Will Haskells around the country right now who are just getting their feet into politics. And there's so many teenagers who are so frustrated, who can't yet vote and are working the polls and are knocking on doors and are trying to take people to the polls. You know,
it's such a good, I wish I could ask him that question now, which is how many other Will Haskells are there? Like I'm sure that they've figured out a way to organize themselves at that level, right? Or the friends of Will. But I actually don't know that I think he's more, as I've used the term before, exception is in the word exceptional. Yeah. And I think he's still very much the exception. I mean, he's 24 years old. He was 22 when he actually became the senator. And he took on an incumbent who had that, she was so dominant in her position that she was unchallenged. She just would be unchallenged. And then he was like, that's not right. So there are a couple of interesting things. And I wrote those notes down, which is, one is it's important, incumbency. It's important to challenge the incumbent, right? Imagine if he has a question, bring it back to marketing for a second, and Jan is here and Scott is here as well, that agencies should have to have a healthy challenge after a certain while. Yeah. You know, that doesn't necessarily. I got to stop for a second. I got to make him spotlight for 1 second. Wow, it kind of looks a. So is this the COVID look?
Yeah, everybody would wear a mask if they had that one available. I'm convinced.
This is Walter from Jeff Dunham. You know Walter.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
He can't possibly extricate himself from this.
Yeah.
This is good. This is like the clowns getting out of the car, right?
No. Look. I think he had one on underneath.
Yeah.
Where did he go?
Whew.
Where is he?
There's a cautious guy right there.
You never can be too careful in this household.
Well, see, I like the outer one scares people into social distance, right? Plus, and then the inner one filters the microbes.
What happened to your what happened to your picture?
Your screen froze, Joseph, on my computer. You're big and your screen froze, and Monty Scott's is frozen.
No, I'm here. I can see Jan.
Again. Okay. Jan's keeping us good.
So what I was trying to say was this whole idea of, the incumbents should if they aren't challenged, then they should challenge themselves. That's the one thing. How do you counter being set in your ways, right? How do you keep things fresh? Same thing could be said about a relationship. And the other one is this idea of term limits. I mean, one of the things that I said provocatively in front of a room full of marketers is there should be term limits on corporations, after which they should either be dissolved, in other words, bye-bye, thanks for playing, dissected, broken up, or disrupted, which is reinvented. And I think, there's definitely an interesting parallel now between politics, philosophy, and marketing, wouldn't you say? The third leg of the tripod.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between the politician who is always posturing and coming at you with, almost like he's behind or she's behind a podium, and it becomes, static. And the one who comes up and actually digs you out,
Yeah.
you know, of a trench that you're stuck in the middle of a sandy storm, and just does it because that's what they do. And Will said the thing that gave him the most joy was going out and helping people rather than spending that time and money on posturing, you know. And I think people, obviously, just like when brands do that and are authentic, are really drawn to that.
Well, I loved his story. That's why I loved his story about the guy he let vent, right? The door he knocked on, and he let the guy vent. And all the venting was the talking points that people robotically go into. And then let's just clear out the talking points. And then he asked that question, what keeps you awake at night? And then you were so far from a talking point. The authenticity had set in, right? At that point. That's what I loved about the magic almost of Will being able to just let the guy vent and not have to fight, not have to take him on point by point and refute him point by point, because that would have just made the adversarialism worse.
And that was point, and I was going to say, and that was point two. That's after he had to answer the question, "How old are you?" You know?
Right.
Hello, Sonny. Hello,
Yeah.
Sonny. By the way, I saw exactly what Jan was doing there. He was doing the John Burkhart move, you know, standing up in the distance and then coming forward. I was trying not to laugh.
lean in. Whenever he goes back, I lean in, you know.
Whenever I lean in, what happens is my green screen messes up. But Jan, I've got to just give you one little tip though. You're going to need sound, right? So either a little lavalier mic or maybe the Yeti. I don't think the Yeti would give you the distance.
He was still not bad, even at a distance. He was still not bad at all.
Now I was like, what is going on? What is going on here? Does he know is he about to tuba us? I wasn't sure what was going on.
Oh, I'm just so glad I remembered at 4 minutes after 12 that you were on at 12 today, because I haven't eaten lunch yet, and I was gonna just go eat lunch and
I really like the 12 hour.
Yeah, it's good. I like the 12.
But it creeps up on me always so quickly that it's
does,
about like 11:45 and I'm sitting here, you know, playing words with friends, and I'm like, oh crap, I've got to write the soliloquy.
You know, maybe if it can become, easy to remember, it's 12 and 5. You know, 12 is a natural break and 5 is a natural break.
Yeah. No, I remember it. I just, you know, it just still creeps up on me, you know, because it's the checklist itself is so, you know, I mean,
as a break for you, Joe, like if you're able to do 12 3 times a day, and then you have a break at 5 twice, you know, two cocktail Coronas.
Well, I can do cocktails every day, by the way. I don't need a show for that.
Hey, I thought the seated soliloquy was especially good. It's good every day, but it was especially good today, the way you made those points about challenge and adversity and hard times being what make leaders, not the...
He knew he had to step it up.
Yeah, had to step it up, right? He did. He stepped it up.
It was something, Scott, that you know dawned on me, that this whole blame thing, and I think maybe was it you who sent it to me? It was like, I blame this one, I blame China, I blame the Democrats, I blame, and it wasn't just about blame, but it was the fact that if you think about leadership, it's what we try and teach our kids as parents, the importance, almost sometimes you don't want adversity for the sake of it, but you almost require it in order for your kid to understand what it is, and if it is bad, how to avoid it, or maybe like focus your entire life to make sure it doesn't happen again. There are very few great leaders that did not have to encounter or overcome some kind of challenge or adversity, and that's what leadership. You know, I hadn't even brought that thought into the show. I'd always spoken about leadership means leading by example. It means no precedent, no best practices, no research. It means risk. It means not fear of failure. Yeah, we talk about that. But in this case, I felt like the adversity point had to be made.
Yeah.
And the corollary of that is blaming everyone but yourself. Or I should say blaming everyone else and not taking responsibility, saying the buck stops here.
See, I was reading the book I'm reading today that I should have read in high school. And the reason I'm reading it today is that over the last 3 days in independent situations, I've heard 2 people refer to the book. And I usually take it that that's a sign I'm supposed to read the book. So it's been on the shelf forever. And so I'm, most of the way through it. But the narrator talks about it's in a Civil War battle. And the narrator talks about one man he meets, a wounded man, as the wounded are retreating from this battle. And he says something like, he has this odd ability to turn almost any obstacle into an advantage. And it occurred to me, Ryan Holiday had a hit book a few years ago based on Marcus Aurelius, a phrase in the Meditations, and Ryan's book is called "The Obstacle is the Way." And that reminded me of a previous show when I was led to reflect on the fact that I've developed a new concept of partnering up with difficulties, partnering up with problems, with obstacles, precisely for the reason you say there, that it's formative of leadership, whether it's political leadership or thought leadership or whatever it is, right? That we don't flee from problems, we don't blame others for problems, but we, in a sense, partner up with the problems and see what they have to teach us and what we can grow to become as well as to understand because of them.
Tom, I think that simple insight there is so profound. And, I've been thinking this week, I think about leadership all the time, but in this week in particular about former presidents of the United States. And you're talking about possibilities now. We were talking about blame before. There are a number of presidents who had reminders on their desks in forms of little plaques. And of course, the most famous one is Harry Truman's "The Buck Stops Here."
Right.
It was his paean to character and integrity and owning whatever happened. Ronald Reagan had one that said, "It can be done."
Mm.
It can be done. This simple optimism and find a way attitude that I think so many good leaders among us represent. And I was recently binging on West Wing.
Oh yeah.
Back issues or back episodes.
Yeah.
And I noticed one there on Jeb Bartlett's desk that was actually on John Kennedy's desk. And it's the Fisherman's Prayer, which goes, "Oh God, thy sea is so great, and my boat is so small." And that's a nod toward humility and how important humility is in leadership. So you put all this together with in terms of optimism and possibilities and owning, decisions and taking the blame and humility together. And those are really 3 important aspects of leadership.
Yeah, they are. They really, really are. When I first confronted the idea of leadership back in the 90s, and I wrote a book called "If Aristotle Ran General Motors," the last chapter is about a balance of nobility and humility. The nobility, a sense of greatness of what you're doing with other people, a sense of the highest ideals and the greatest possibilities, balanced with a humility of spirit as you walk the path, so that you're open to others and their advice and their insights and what they have to teach you at every step of the way. One guy asked me once, I was speaking to a big financial firm in Boston, and one of their leadership people came up to me and said, I got a question. One of the 7 things you talked about today was confidence. And he said, "I'm a very confident person, but I'm afraid my direct reports experience it as arrogance. I'm so afraid they will experience it as arrogance. I'm afraid to show my true extent of confidence half the time." And I said, "Well, then ask them for their opinions, because arrogant people never do. They'll never mistake your confidence for arrogance if you will sincerely ask them for what they think." And he said, "Geez, that's a simple solution." And I said, "Well, I hope it is."
It really is, right?
This makes me think of how, I'm not as aware of England politics, British politics, as one who lives there, of course. But when I see or hear Boris Johnson say something like he did, I think, today or yesterday, and anticipating shutting down a great deal of the country now. He said that we have to be humble in the face of nature. So here's a guy who had coronavirus. Here's a guy who denied it early on. And here's a guy who has, even if it's in this small way, come around to grow, to grow as a person and as a leader, and not feel like it was a detriment, a sign of weakness to make this change.
Yeah.
But therein lies the key point, which is the ability to be humbled and also recognize how powerful that moment is, this awakening, which is why I actually said in my soliloquy a couple of days ago, I think yesterday, that I truly believe, just like I believe that if Hillary Clinton had gone on Howard Stern, she would have won the presidency. And I'm right about that. Trust me, I'm right on this one. I'm also right on the fact that had Donald Trump come out of Walter Reed, I'm a changed man.
Right.
I've seen the light. Wear a mask. I was wrong. That this election would at least have swung further towards him.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Now, of course, the risk in that scenario, if we're gaming, kind of gaming, not gaming, you know what I mean, like game playing or scenario planning, game theory, is that the risk of that would have been that he would have now been perceived as weak, and that little bit of blood, the piranhas would have come in. But who thinks amongst you wise men, who thinks had he done that, it would have ended better for him versus worse?
But I think it would have made him look weak to his most ardent supporters. Their support isn't going away regardless, but they're the types that see vulnerability as a weakness rather than as a strength. He could have won more people over had he come out with a humbled viewpoint. And let's face it, there's nothing humble about Donald Trump, even though he'll tell you he is the best at humility.
The most humble person in the room.
Ever.
No one's ever seen anything like it, frankly.
Exactly.
How humble he is.
I wrote about vulnerability a couple of weeks ago in my newsletter, and it was being vulnerable really has 4 elements. It's about being honest with people, acknowledging your mistakes, and when has he ever acknowledged a mistake? Asking for help when you need it. It's okay that you don't know everything. None of us is a superhuman. And then 4, take the time to build relationships with people. And I think, as Tom noted, asking people for their feedback, their opinion, that's a way of building relationships with people. He does none of those. So the vulnerability simply can't be there. And this opportunity to reach people that he normally wouldn't reach, it just went away.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think, I mean, this is, it feels weird today. It's almost like the day is here and it's a bit of a weird anticlimax, although nothing's really going on today except for the fact that people are voting.
The storm, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been phone banking already a little bit today. As I said, this idea of revealing character, like I have to tell you that I'm not just saying it because he's on right now, but when we look back at lifelong Republicans that culminated in the Lincoln Project, that took a position right at the beginning, that kind of moral character, or that kind of, at least, so what I'm looking for, that clearness or clarity of
principle,
being able to stay true to what those principles are.
Right.
That is the kind of moral fiber that we need. I've been thinking to myself, I've been having lots of introspection. I cannot wait for the day that I vote for the better candidate, the Republican over the corrupt Democrat. Like I actually want that day, because I was thinking I'll tell you what I mean by that. What I mean by that is I was thinking, if the roles were reversed, what would I have done? Would I have walked away from the get-go and I said, I will not be a part of this. I will be voting. I will be writing in Mickey Mouse as a write-in candidate, or I'll be voting for, for the Republican. Would I have done the same from my moral, high ground?
I did.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I'm saying. I'm not just saying it because you're on.
It was easy because the party.
And you never but just hold on one second. You never relented, and you put yourself out there publicly, knowing full well that you were going to alienate people as well, and you just did it because it was the right thing to do. So I just wanted to add that.
That's exactly it. It's about knowing your own moral compass and sticking by it. I see plenty of people that are still lining up behind Trump, even today, because of their bank account.
Right.
Sorry, does your morality have a price to it? Are you willing to take a payoff in order to give up everything you believe in? Well, evidently some people are. Yeah. I'm not made that way.
But that was the 60 Minutes. I went and watched the 60 Minutes clip as well. And that woman who lost a family member to COVID, but she said, my 401k is doing great. And I thought to myself, you know what? There are two elements to it. It's not just the financial aspect, but it's me versus we, right?
Right.
It's me capitalism versus we capitalism. And I just parlay that with this wonderful thread we've had throughout the show, which is this idea of money, finances, wealth, all of that should be looked at as light, as a flame versus a piece of a pie.
Right.
Even if it's expanding the pie itself, but generally it's about my piece of the pie. And if I give you light, that doesn't detract from my light. And I thought that was an amazing concept. And that's kind of where we should be. And that applies to morality. It applies to so many things.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I think Biden in office, it would be very productive, very healing to the country if he does take a, team of rivals approach and puts Republicans on the cabinet, and and take that chance, because the divide's so intense. I mean, I'd love to see in a closer examination what really happened after the Civil War. How did we really heal?
It's a very good. That's a really good point. And let me ask you a question. I don't know, were you showing a book on
Team of Rivals? I just got my copy the other day. I still haven't read it yet. Yeah.
Is that what it's about? Is that McChrystal?
No, that's Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Just Doris.
Doris Kearns Goodwin.
It's what
you think I could get her to come on the show?
Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote No Ordinary Time, which was her Pulitzer Prize winner, and it's reads like a novel, a story of Eleanor and Franklin, and mostly Eleanor.
Too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this one.
Oh no, who's that?
Leadership and.
Oh, she did that one too. Okay.
She looks at Lincoln, both Roosevelts and LBJ.
Yeah.
Crisis.
Wow.
That is a great benchmark, Jan, and this idea of because at least many of us are fearing what that unrest looks like.
Yeah, and who would those people be? I mean, there's one who looms large, and he'll probably would be stoned by his fellow Republicans at first. But of course, Romney could make
Romney for sure. Romney for sure. I think is going to
imagine which cabinet position Romney would be great for as a business guy.
Yeah. Right.
John Kasich from
Kasich is another.
Oh, Kasich would be awesome.
Look, John Huntsman was a Republican, right? He was in Obama's. I think he was.
Was he?
But could you take somebody who was virulent Republican? Not just somebody who.
I don't think you'd want to.
No, because that's too much a clash of temperament and more than
Lindsey Graham's going to need a job soon. So.
I would love to see Jeb Bush be involved somehow. Having spent an evening with him a few years ago, right after Trump was elected, and he struck me as this extraordinarily reasonable guy who, has a Hispanic wife. He appreciates diversity. he has a lot of solid views, and
Republican governors who really took a very thoughtful, pragmatic approach to COVID, like the Republican from Ohio.
Yeah.
Or from Maryland.
John Huntsman served in nearly every presidential administration since the presidency of Ronald Reagan, but he was affiliated with the Republican Party.
So there's still a deep bench, you know, for the Republican point of view, and it is interesting though how we have to reach back so often to find these statesmen, you know, that we could really benefit from having as a voice in the administration.
And some legislation, of course, one of the dangers in the situation we're in is to overreach, as I think the Obama administration has been criticized for, in overreaching with Obamacare before they were able to straighten out some of the federal mess of the crisis and therefore let people kind of off the hook. And it's a long drawn out process, healthcare, et cetera. So in this case, you know, Biden comes in and he has to focus obviously on on COVID, and on racial injustice, and climate, you know, three major things. And there's probably a shitload of other stuff that people want them to do. So, you know, his ability to focus and of course do the right thing is going to be critical. But some of the legislation that, you know, never gets touched until it's too late, like, for example, the electorate versus popular vote, like the Supreme Court, that I know has been touched on by Biden, but, you know, so far in a negative way, as seen by Republicans. These type of things can just show a thoughtfulness for the future. And like, we have some traps that are set here. Let's be the ones that undo it, even if it undoes us as a party. Yeah.
But again, rising to what is right, to what is of value to your principles, rather than the pragmatic exigencies of what you think will get you what you want short term. You know, it's interesting to me that while we've had such a mess the last few years in national politics, it's been the same stretch of time where we see a renaissance almost amongst business leaders concerning how to do things right. You know, not just John Mackey and 3 or 4 other people, but one of my friends, Alan Murray, he runs Fortune and Time. He has a podcast, Leadership Now, where he interviews kind of what we would call, you know, enlightened leaders now. And there are a lot more of them than we've typically heard about. There seems to be a genuine movement in the corporate world to take over some of the leadership vacuum that we've had the last few years in politics. So that's a good thing to see. And maybe it'll produce some of our future political leaders, you know, some of these CEOs who are doing things right.
Well, you know, one of the things I know I said this a lot in my younger, more, shall we say, flippant, snarky days. So like last year is what I'm trying to say. No, but like, you know, in the early days of blogging, like people would, and Rashad Tabakawala is one of my mentors, says that he's probably, you know, one of the most senior executives when he said this. And I was just this rogue renegade mercenary. But like, the question was, how do we create change and cultural change and in these corporations to, you know, be thinking about things like digital and whatever. And the answer that I gave 15 years ago and that Rashad gave up until probably yesterday was, we need to wait for these old, you know, old farts to basically die. Mm-hmm. I mean, they need to die. I mean, we don't want to kill them, but he was that explicit about it, which is the only, you can't change them. They're not going to be changed. They don't want to change. You know, you got the added complexity in a corporation of the parachute or the retirement, or, you know, I mean, and sometimes it might just be as simple as you just got to wait for generationally for these guys to die off.
And that's one of the most famous studies of the history of science was this little book by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, where basically he said that's been the way science has progressed as well. The older generation who are just calcified in wrong views, they had to die off again and again and again in order for science to progress. So it's not just in the corporate world, it's not just in politics. It just seems to be a recurring personal problem. And that's something I've been looking at for 5 years now, trying to understand why smart and talented people do so many foolish things. And
I've been smart people make dumb decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been searching world literature for insights about that. And it's something I don't think is an impossible problem to deal with. You know, right now we say, yeah, the old guys have to just die off, and that's always the way it's been. But it need not always be the way it will be, because I think if we can spot those features of seniority, maturity in a profession or in an institution that holds people back from seeing what's in front of their face, we can do an around it.
Look, I haven't studied it, and I don't have any experience or training in it, but I've touched on that subject in various aspects of my career and my writing, and you know, the proxy I use for it, and it's very interesting. I noticed that I always would think about this whole idea of generationally them dying out and dying off, and then what happened is a lot of my contemporaries were offered C-suite type positions in an agency or even Scott probably has a lot more firsthand knowledge being in a corporation. But what really happened was expecting them to be the bull in the china shop, expecting them to just suddenly like, this is the way it's going to be. They didn't actually act that way. They almost, it was as if they were like, you know, some invasion of the body snatchers. Yep. They started just acting like corporate executives.
Yep, I've seen that.
And that's because they stepped into the machine and the process and the power. And when you're given the power, the last thing you want to do now is rock the boat. And so suddenly, when you thought they would cut their TV budgets to zero and in with digital and social, they actually, you know, disappointed the world or me or whatever.
Because they were more afraid to lose their new status than they were eager to use it. And that's often what you find in life, right? A real estate guy I know who's a nationally prominent real estate salesperson has often said people buy more out of fear of loss than they do a hope of gain. And that same sort of phenomenon is operative, I think, there. I've seen people rise to positions in the academic world where the same thing happened. They were people you could talk to when they were professors, and maybe even when they were a dean. You could talk to them. You could have a real conversation. But as soon as they got to be provost or president, no, there's an inviolable shield that goes up. You can never get an honest opinion. They're afraid to lose their position, and everything is defensive. All the fortress walls go up.
I like that, use versus lose.
Yeah,
the status.
I think it's testament to the intractability of corporate culture. Yeah. It is so strong, and unless the change comes from the top, yeah, and wholesale from the board level and from the CEO, I saw this happen firsthand at Ford. Alan Mulally came in from outside of the auto industry, from outside of Ford. And the Ford culture was legendary in its willingness to erect fiefdoms, where people would undermine each other to make each other's projects fail within the same company. Wow. Right? Alan got there and he said, look, it's all about working together. And I'll tell you, Alan reminds me so much of Joe Biden. And the same kinds of leadership traits that they have, even the way they speak. It's about coming together. It's about unity. It's about everyone pulling in the same direction. And everyone thought Alan was going to bring in his own wave of executives, the like thinkers. And he didn't want to do that at all. He said, we're going to see who's actually on board with this. There's a new sheriff in town. There's a new culture, a new way of doing things. We're going to see who actually comes on board with this. And for those who don't want to, it will be natural attrition. right? Allen won't have to fire anyone. People will just opt out because they won't be able to handle the new way of doing things. And in doing so, he suddenly opened up the field to people who wanted to participate in this kind of leadership, in this kind of thinking. Now, unfortunately, when Allen left after 8 years, even that wasn't enough to get down into the trenches and extract this culture, because I heard from some people the month before Allen was leaving, and this is one of the reasons I left, they rubbed their hands together with glee and like, oh, finally, we can go back to the way things used to be. And I'm like, are you people out of your friggin' minds?
Right.
I mean, you want to go back to that way of thinking?
Yeah.
I can't be part of this.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. You know,
It's,
it is something of so many, I've heard so many Democrats admit they're not, how unexcited they are about Biden. And I think that reflects a deep misunderstanding of what we need right now. It's almost like the guy's book, Good to Great. And
Jim Collins.
Collins. And I find a lot of flaws in that book. But one of the things that I thought he said was important is that it's not the flashy leaders who build strong organizations. It's the leaders who quietly get the right things done, you know? And that's what I think you have in Biden, a person who can quietly get the right things done, not because he's a genius, but because he recognizes genius and expertise. And, you know, it's the thing we were promised with Trump, all the best people. He would surround himself with all the best people. And of course, the opposite happened, except on occasion with a great chief of staff who just couldn't make a difference, was up against an impossible job.
But that should, I mean, but that was a red herring, and I mean, not a red herring. That was a red flag, I should say, in of itself. When we could all see the turnover and the fact that everyone was acting, you know, I'm just sorry about that Freudian slip there. You know, herrings and flags, but
Pickled herring,
pickled flags. But when I had Bob Leardes from the ANA on the show, and it was just so interesting, him being a Trekkie, and actually seeing how progressive Star Trek was in terms of diversity, inclusivity, leadership, and that the captain's chair was in the middle of the room. He was surrounded by all his people. It's just something so simple as that in terms of just thinking about team.
It's the modern day round table, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Same kind of thing. Hey, before we get off the idea of genius, I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes on that topic. Mediocrity knows nothing higher than itself, but talent instantly recognizes genius.
Oh, that's good. I like that a lot.
That's a Sherlock Holmes quote.
Come on. Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
Wow.
Mediocrity knows nothing higher than itself, but talent instantly recognizes genius. The J is for genius.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again. Could you say that again?
Mediocrity knows nothing.
Type it in.
No, I just want to hear it. Thank you.
Mediocrity knows nothing higher than itself, but talent instantly recognizes genius.
Yeah,
But still type it in.
A lot. I like that a lot. It's akin to a paradox I've often confronted, that a fool cannot recognize wisdom. It takes a modicum of wisdom to recognize greater wisdom. Right. And sometimes, as my father used to say, you might as well be talking to a stone wall when you're trying to get a person to see beyond where they are, who does not have that capacity. Right. And, you know, it was my flaw early in life to think everybody has basically the same capacities, you know, and everybody has basically the same needs, and everybody has basically the same recognitions. If presented with a better option, they'll see it as a better option. And in fact, when I left university life to be a independent philosopher, people said, you've given up 20 years of guaranteed income. What are you, crazy? And I had actually a false view that gave me confidence. My false view, and I came to see this false. I said, people buy two things. They buy what they want, and they buy what they need. Everybody needs wisdom. Don't worry, I'll always have customers. Well, where I was wrong is this. People don't buy what they want and what they need. They buy what they want and what they believe they need. So if they don't even have a clue they need wisdom, they're not going to put out a penny for wisdom. So my job was going to be harder than I thought, because people were saying to me, how do you know that 6 months from now, businesses will still want to see you as a philosopher give a talk? How do you know? And I said, well, I don't know. I just know I'm supposed to do this. I feel a sense of calling, So, but yeah, it is interesting. That quote is so resonant with what I learned. And maybe it's not the case that he who is mediocre today is fated to always be mediocre, and never be able to see beyond where they are now. Maybe there are more possibilities for change and transformation and alchemy than we realize. But that quote really catches a lot. It captures a lot of what we do.
I think it has to do with the idea of being open-minded.
Yeah, it does.
Sure, we're not going to know everything, but are we open to learning more? To me, that's one of the hallmarks of a leader, is a lifelong learner. And interestingly, this whole discussion, I think it circles back around to humility and vulnerability.
I was going to say the very same thing, right? The very same thing. Yeah.
One of the biggest moves that I saw in bringing Alan Mullally in was Bill Ford, the great grandson of the founder of Ford Motor Company, stepped aside and said, this job is bigger than me. I can't handle it. I'm going to turn over the CEO reins to Alan, CEO and president. And he even offered Alan the chairmanship of the board. And Alan, in his wisdom, said, I'm not doing this alone. I need you there, Bill, because you have certain ways of seeing things and relationships that I don't have, that we need to do this as a team. And that's the humility that both of them approach this with.
Well, that's so much of that comes from security, as opposed to people that are so insecure. And that security you can allow someone in when you can be assured that there'll be a place for you on the other side, or even better, maybe there isn't, and it is time to move on. But how many people are like that? How many people can open themselves up? I just, as a little personal anecdote, last week with Brian Marescu coming in, I felt completely, out of my league, like outplayed, out of my league. Like I just, I was completely intimidated, and it was worse that, Tom was on the show, like asking questions as well. And then I was like, I felt even worse about myself.
You did great. You did great. I couldn't imagine anybody doing better.
No, but what I did is I took that insecurity. I took that, did I have a bad show? Was I not on top of my game? What could I have done better? And I channeled it in the most positive way, which is what a great gift I got today, was the ability to feel that humility, to be humbled by the fact that this is, and here's the simple insight. This is a man that spent 12 years of his life writing and researching this book. Right. Of course he's going to know everything about it. Of course he's going to be up at this level, and you don't have the resources to do all the planning. And then I said, I was talking to my wife and I said, but Joe Rogan was amazing in this. So I'm like, but Joe Rogan has a team of people that are prepping and in his ear, and and then what happened is I started to then see the beautiful things. Like, for example, I think you said it. You made me feel so much better, Tom, and you said, the expression on his face when I had the Fight Club scene.
Oh, I've never seen anything so good. That was just that. I thought he was going to fall out of Uruguay into Paraguay. I mean, I thought he fell back laughing.
Well, one of the Guays, and so to thine own self be true. Yeah. Is that? Yeah. And that's what. And I felt like and I thought to myself afterwards, maybe I shouldn't have done the fun facts, and that was like too trivial or superficial. But it was the ability, and then I realized there was something. The nugget in all of that was the fact that I would not have known that had I not listened to the entire Joe Rogan interview. Right.
Absolutely, and you would not have gotten the revelations in the after show from Brian that you distinctively got. and Rogan apparently didn't get, if you had not blown him away with the silly photoshopped Fight Club thing. That was a key to really a bonding thing and a trust thing and a, oh, okay, we're all being real people here thing, which you're so good at, see? I mean, you're the Brian Moore rescue of what you do. And he was probably thinking, oh my goodness, this guy, you know, I hope I'm good enough for this guy.
I'm trying to be more like the Scott Monty of what I do.
No. And Tom's got an excellent point here. I think every one of us is good at something. And the moment we try to become like somebody else, to try and affect their mannerisms, their knowledge, etc., we lose the authenticity. And authenticity is the key to vulnerability and to building relationships with people. And I think Tom nailed it. You were you. Don't apologize for it, you know, and don't try to become like Brian. Own your space.
Yeah.
Right? And I used to tell this with people inside of Ford when they would ask me to consult with them. Well, how do we do social media for customer care or for IT or legal or whatever? I said, I don't have the first clue about how you do what you do. All I can tell you is about my zone of expertise. You guys are the experts. That made them feel much more confident about the advice I was giving and about their own expertise. And it was amazing.
It's actually that is a real, it's not even a best practice. It's a universal truth, because what you're doing in that is saying, I'm not going to tell you how to run your business.
Right.
And most of the time people come in and it's me, look how smart I am. You know, look how much I know. What do you know? You don't know anything. You're dumb. You don't get it. You know, internally, that's even worse. That is a cancer internally that never, ever turns out well for that person. Externally, it's short-lived as well.
You know, I think, it reminds me that I've heard in some leadership or read in some leadership books or listened to it that maybe not strangely enough, but strangely enough, the simple chemical of anxiety in one is really destructive. And when there's a level of anxiety that is in a team, ideas get not only stymied, but manipulated. I'm looking at a quote right now because I wanted to look it up. I think it was from a book called A Failure of Nerve. And it said, whenever a family is driven by anxiety, what will also be present is a failure of nerve among its leaders. And it sounds like, well, what? Well, you know, when you have a Biden character who has empathy and has gone through pain, and then you have one who, like Trump, who denies that and it's all about himself, you see the difference between what anxiety breeds in a team, in leadership, and people running around who are anxious rather than, I think we've talked about this phrase, a relaxed brain, to come up with ideas that can change things.
I have to say, it's been so funny because in thinking about character, right? And you know, Joe Biden, quite possibly the most corrupt politician in the history. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's even worse than that. So now what I do, I've got a very simple thing when talking to people, whether it's privately or online, which is I just go, you know, Republican, like talking point. Yeah, talking point. Like you mentioned the word Venezuela, like we're going to become Venezuela. I'm like, that is just, it's so far from the truth. It's just a talking point, you know, and do you not realize, of course, if I'm being a little more snarky, I'm going to be like, you realize you're part of a cult. You realize you've been brainwashed, which is not a good way to like foster a proper conversation. But it's just like, I mean, like what, you honestly believe that as Borat would say, the USA is in danger of becoming Venezuela? Venezuela? Like, are you mad?
Well, it's like Trump telling everyone that there's going to be no air conditioning, no heat, no Christmas, no Thanksgiving. I'm like, well,
no America.
That's what we've got right now, isn't it? I mean,
I know, it's so fun. Can I read you guys? I don't know why, apropos what, but it just occurred to me I should read you a quote I posted on social media today because you don't have time to read my social media. T.S. Eliot, who said half the harm that's done in this world is due to people who want to feel important. They don't mean to do harm, but the harm does not interest them, or they do not see it, or they justify it because they are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Thought that was pretty deep. That's pretty Donald Trump. And it's amazing, guys, how many classic books I've been reading recently. And by classics, I mean not just things thousands of years ago, but even books 100 years ago, that I will have in the backs of book. When I read a book, I keep notes in the back of themes and topics. I'll put courage, pages 37, 81, and 112. So I can go back and find those passages. And I now have a DT note in the back of almost every classic book I read, because there are explanations of Donald Trump and his followers in Main Street, or in Babbitt, or in so many books of the past. I mean, even books written in the 1700s or 1800s, I find this mindset of both Donald Trump himself and the followers, where they're talking points that make no sense if examined for 3 seconds. I find this as a historic thing that teaches us about human weaknesses, human nature, what happens to people when things are not going well in their lives. And it's a great time of education for me, to see things I haven't fully appreciated in the past.
And look,
I was run.
Yeah,
We got to run. Somebody's waiting at the door here.
Thanks for being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for
great, you guys. So what a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Gift.
Thank you so much.
And listen, Scott, our little our community thing on Fridays as well. I mean, I have to say, Jen, you're not a guest. You haven't been a guest on the show yet, but you will be soon. But I would love for you guys to be monthly, at least monthly, because I just love these conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, they really are good.
Well, thank you for making them possible, and great to see you, Scott.
Thanks.
Keep up the good work on your health.
Amen.
Oh yeah, I didn't even. He looked great. I didn't even realize that he had COVID.
Oh, I didn't realize that. He's had
COVID. He posted about a week about. Don't you remember? On one of the shows, I showed. I said get well soon. Well, maybe I didn't.
It was unfortunate because you called it funeral day.
Oh
no, but he appreciated the humor of that. It happened to be plan your funeral day.
Now,
like think ahead.
I want to ask you a question. Are you still recording?
No, I'll stop now. So just bye-bye, everyone. And
everybody's bye.